Someone hands you a gift you don't like. You smile. You say thank you. You even hold it up and admire it for a second longer than necessary, turning it slightly in the light like you're genuinely impressed. Inside your head, a completely different sentence is running on repeat. One you would never say out loud. One nobody in the room has any way of hearing. Now imagine that sentence wasn't private anymore. Imagine everyone around you, right now, could hear exactly what you're thinking, in real time, with no filter and no delay. Your first instinct is probably relief. No more guessing. No more misunderstandings. Finally, real honesty. But the real answer is far stranger than that. Because a world where everyone could read your thoughts isn't a more honest version of human society. It's a version of human society that most researchers doubt could have ever formed in the first place. To understand why, you have to start with something psychologists discovered almost by accident, back in the late 1990s. Two researchers, Thomas Gilovich and Kenneth Savitsky, ran a series of experiments built around a simple question. When you feel something strong on the inside, nervousness, a lie, disgust you're trying to hide, how much of that actually shows on your face? Participants were asked to lie convincingly while a panel of strangers tried to guess who was lying. Beforehand, the liars predicted they'd be caught almost immediately. Their heart was pounding. Their palms were sweating. Surely it was written all over them. It wasn't. Observers guessed correctly barely better than chance, again and again, across dozens of versions of the experiment. Gilovich and Savitsky called this the illusion of transparency, the surprisingly consistent gap between how exposed your inner thoughts feel to you and how invisible they actually are to everyone else. Your mind, it turns out, is a far better vault than you give it credit for. This isn't just true for ordinary social lies either. It holds up even when technology gets involved. Polygraph machines, the so-called lie detectors used in interrogation rooms for decades, measure things like heart rate, sweat, and breathing, on the assumption that deception leaks out through the body, the same way people assume it leaks through their face. Professional psychological organizations have spent decades pointing out how unreliable that assumption actually is. The body's stress response looks almost identical, whether you're lying or simply terrified of being wrongly accused of lying. Even with wires attached to your skin, your actual thoughts stay remarkably well hidden. So what happens if you take that vault away completely? To answer that, you have to go back even further than adulthood, back to early childhood, and a question that sounds almost too simple to matter. At what age do humans first understand that other people can believe something untrue? In the early 1980s, two psychologists named Heinz Wimmer and Joseph Perner ran an experiment that's now considered a classic in developmental psychology. They showed young children a simple story acted out with dolls. One doll hides a marble in a basket, then leaves the room. While she's gone, a second doll moves the marble somewhere else. Children were asked one question. When the first doll comes back, where will she look for her marble? Children younger than about 4 almost always answered with the marble's real location, the one only the child, the audience, actually knew. They couldn't yet imagine that someone else might believe something false. By around age 4 or 5, something clicks. Children start answering correctly. They understand, often for the first time, that another person's mind can hold a version of reality that doesn't match their own. Researchers call this theory of mind, the basic human ability to recognize that other people have separate, sometimes wrong, beliefs from yours. A similar version of this test, often called the Salian task, later became one of the most important tools psychologists use to study autism, since some autistic children take longer to develop this particular skill, and understanding that gap has shaped decades of research into how different minds model other minds. It's easy to overlook how strange this ability actually is. Every friendship, every negotiation, every surprise party, every private thought you've ever protected depends on the assumption that other people's minds are genuinely separate from your own, capable of being wrong, capable of not knowing what you know. Remove that separation entirely, and remove theory of mind's whole reason for existing along with it. Here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. Some researchers argue that the ability to hide your thoughts didn't just happen to accompany human intelligence. It may have driven a huge amount of it. In 1976, a psychologist named Nicholas Humphrey proposed an idea that later researchers, including Richard Byrne and Andrew Whiten, expanded into what's now called the Machiavellian intelligence hypothesis. Their argument goes like this. Primate brains, including yours, didn't grow large mainly to solve ecological problems like finding food or building shelter. They grew large to navigate other minds, to predict what a rival was planning, to remember who owed who a favor, to bluff, to persuade, to conceal, to detect when someone else was concealing something from you. In other words, the very same trick your brain uses to keep your thoughts about that unwanted gift hidden behind a polite smile may be one of the oldest, most evolutionarily important tricks it knows how to do. You can see rougher, earlier versions of this same trick throughout the primate world. Researchers studying wild chimpanzees have documented individuals who discover a hidden source of food and then deliberately avoid looking at it, or even walk in the opposite direction, until the more dominant members of their group have wandered off. That chimpanzee isn't just hiding food. It's managing what another mind believes to be true. The same fundamental move you make every time you keep your face neutral around a surprise you're not supposed to know about yet. Total transparency wouldn't just make you a more honest version of yourself. It would strip away one of the core reasons your species developed the kind of intelligence it has. So maybe the fantasy of everyone reading your thoughts isn't really about honesty at all. Maybe it's about exhaustion, about how tiring it can feel to constantly manage what other people see of you. In 1996, a psychologist named Bella DePaulo set out to measure exactly how much of that managing actually happens. She had participants keep a daily diary of every lie they told, no matter how small, for over a week. The results were striking. On average, people told roughly 1 to 2 lies a day in ordinary conversation, most of them tiny, almost invisible acts of social smoothing. Telling someone you love a gift you don't. Saying you're fine when you're not. Agreeing a meeting went well when it didn't. DePaulo found these small deceptions weren't cruel or manipulative in most cases. They were social glue, the everyday lubricant that keeps relationships from grinding against each other every single time two people's actual thoughts don't quite line up. Interestingly, her research also found the pattern wasn't random. People reported lying least often to the partners and close family members they felt closest to, and more often to acquaintances and strangers. Exactly the relationships where a small protective gap between thought and speech tends to matter most. The people you trust the deepest still get a filtered version of your mind. They just get a far less filtered one than everybody else. Now picture removing all of it at once. Every polite deflection gone. Every private doubt about a friend's decision suddenly audible. Every unspoken attraction, irritation, or boredom broadcast the instant it forms, with no chance to soften it, phrase it carefully, or decide it isn't worth saying at all. It wouldn't feel like a more connected world. It would feel like standing in a room with no walls, where every room you've ever needed, the one to calm down in, the one to think something through before deciding whether it deserves to be said, has simply been demolished. Your thoughts aren't secrets because you have something shameful to hide. They're private because privacy is the space where you get to decide who you become before anyone else weighs in. It's where a half-formed opinion gets to stay half-formed a little longer, instead of hardening into something permanent the instant it appears. It's where you get to feel a flash of jealousy, or pettiness, or doubt. Examine it, and quietly let it pass, without that fleeting version of you becoming the only version anyone else ever sees. Without that space, you wouldn't just lose your ability to be diplomatic. You'd lose the room where you get to keep becoming a slightly better version of yourself before the world ever finds out about the worse one. The pause between feeling something and choosing whether to say it is not a flaw in human communication. It's the whole architecture the rest of communication is built on top of. This isn't only a thought experiment anymore either. Neuroscientists have already started building early systems that can reconstruct rough outlines of what someone is looking at, or even loosely paraphrase the gist of what they're thinking about, just by watching patterns of activity in their brain. The technology is still crude, still slow, still nowhere close to a clean readout of your inner monologue. But the direction it's heading in is exactly the scenario you imagined at the very start of this video. And it's part of why some neuroscientists and ethicists have started arguing for something they call cognitive liberty, a basic right to keep the contents of your own mind private, the same way you already have a right to keep your home private. Right now, that right barely needs defending, because your brain still does the defending for you, automatically, every single second of every single day. Think about how much of your ordinary life quietly depends on that defense holding up. The compliment you chose not to give because it wasn't quite true. The disagreement you swallowed in a meeting because the timing was wrong. The private moment of doubt about a decision you'd already made public. One you worked through alone before anyone else needed to know it had existed at all. None of that required lying in any dramatic sense. It just required the one thing every human mind has quietly relied on since long before language even existed. A gap, however small, between what you feel and what the world gets to see. Someone hands you a gift you don't like, in this version of the story. You open your mouth to speak, and for a moment you actually consider saying exactly what you're thinking. Then you don't. You smile instead, choosing the version of the moment that protects both of you. And somewhere behind your eyes, in a room nobody else will ever be allowed to enter, the real, complicated, unfiltered thought is still yours, and only yours to keep.